Well, I have been actively practicing immigration law for over 41 years. I've been licensed as an attorney for 41 years. Immigration, I have a bachelor's degree in economics from Brandeis that I got in 1971. I got my law degree from Boston College in 1975, and I have a master's in public administration from Harvard's Kennedy School that I got in 1983. During that whole time, I've been practicing law full-time, and I have specialized in immigration. Immigration is a very, very complex field that the school simply wants you as long as you fulfill their needs. You fulfill their needs by paying them tuition to be a student, and for the group of people that you've identified, which are graduate students, you fulfill their needs by helping them to teach and educate other students. The universities, the colleges and universities, will keep you in status because they have to if you're going to work for them. But they have no investment at all in getting you a green card or allowing you in any way, shape, or form to stay in the United States after you are no longer with the university. So you need to think of that when you deal with the university. The biggest point with that is that most colleges and universities have been authorized by the government to issue J exchange visitor visas. What the schools frequently don't make very clear is that for most people, accepting that visa status carries with it something called a 2-year return residency requirement, which means you must physically live in your native country for 2 years before you can change status in the U.S., get an H or an L work visa, or get a green card. There are some special exemptions that we have for Canadians because they're the only country in the world that does not require visa stamps. So they have special opportunities, but I won't take the time now to focus on those. So a 2-year return residency requirement comes under Section 212E of the Immigration and Naturalization Act, can arise several different ways. And again, some of these things can be very, very hard to figure out and difficult to even recognize. So there are one way to become subject to the return residency is if your country has put your job on what is known as the skills list. So your country has said to the United States that anybody who comes to the United States and gets a J visa to do this, whatever it is someone we want back in our country. So if you're a nuclear physicist, chances are very good your government says, we want that person back when he or she is done with their program. It depends. It depends on what the subject is and how strongly the country feels about it. Some countries are very unwilling to release you from that. But if your 2-year return residency is a function of your country having put your skill on their skills list, you can get rid of that requirement by getting something called a no objection letter from your government. It's not the US government, it's your government. And then with that, you have to petition the US government to remove that restriction, that 212E restriction from your case. If you do that, if you can do that, fine. But there are other ways that you can become subject to the return residency, and the biggest and most difficult is if you accept money from any agency, but especially a US government agency. In the case of taking money from a US government agency, it is incredibly difficult to get them to agree to waive your return residency. So sometimes, even though you say, well, I didn't take any money, you must be very careful. You must talk to the school representative that is administering that J program to find out whether or not you have insurance. Could be $50 a month. And at the end of your stay, you've paid for everything else, but at the end of your stay they say, oh, I'm sorry, you have to go back because of this. So again, I come back to the school is not your friend. The school is not invested in helping you pursue other immigration avenues or your green card. The school is only concerned with, are you lawful while you are there with them and working with and for them? Because of the costs, many schools are authorized to issue J visas. So they use in-house staff, and they have their own paperwork and their own everything. So it costs them very little money to issue you a J visa. Beware. Once they issue you that J visa, you are highly, highly, highly at risk of having to go back to your native country for 2 years. Another option that the schools don't discuss, but it's a very important option, is what is known as the CAP exempt H-1B visa.
Yeah.
So the CAP exempt H-1B visa, we currently have a system. First of all, let's just understand what is an H-1B visa. It is called the temporary professional visa. The general rule of thumb is that it is a visa for people who have at least a bachelor's degree or higher, and those people are doing a job that requires that bachelor's degree. Now, it's very important that the degree be related to the job. It is not enough. For example, many businesses say, let's use a hotel as an example. A hotel might have a job for someone to be a concierge, and the hotel will say, we only hire college graduates. Well, that's good, but that's not going to get them an H-1B, because they will hire a college graduate with any degree. In order for you to get an H-1B, the job you are doing, that you're being hired for, has to reasonably require your specific degree. And this is often a basis for denial by the Immigration Service when your degree does not closely match up to your job. There are currently approximately between 80 and 85,000 H-1B visas available a year that are called CAP subject, which means in order to get those visas, you have to go through the CAP process. Here's the problem. There are approximately between 60 and 65,000 basic, if you will, basic H-1B visas, and then there's an extra 20,000 available only to people who have at least a master's degree or higher that they got from an accredited U.S. college or university. Now, you may file for one of those visas up to 6 months before the visa comes available. The visas come available on October 1st of every year. That's the annual day for the United States. That's our calendar. You may file up to 6 months before that, which just happens to be April 1st, which here in the United States is often called April Fool's Day, when people play jokes on each other.
Right.
Maybe there's something there, because in many ways the Immigration Service is playing a joke on all of us with this system. So here's how it works. The Immigration Service currently allows you a 1-week window to get your application in beginning on April 1st. If it arrives at their offices at 11:59 on March 30th, they won't accept it. They'll reject it. So it has to be after midnight, April 1st. So from after midnight, April 1st, for 5 business days, as long as your application arrives, it's given a number. And then what they do is they enter you into a lottery. Now, your best chance of getting selected is if you have that master's degree, because they enter you in the 20,000 group, and if you don't get selected in the 20,000 group, you're automatically entered again in the 60 to 65,000 group. So you get 2 chances. The number of applications received, so that's a little over 80,000 visas, right? You're the mathematician. What are my chances of getting a visa when the number of applications received this year is supposedly 244,000 applications for a little over 80,000 positions?
25%.
Not good.
Yep. Water.
Not good.
No, not good.
Okay. There is nothing that can control you getting selected. And then once you get selected, you have to fight with them to get approved. There are also cap exempt H-1B visas, and those are visas, H-1B visas, available to colleges and universities.
Okay. Sure. Okay. Yeah.
So, the colleges and universities have the right, assuming they are either public or private nonprofit colleges. This does not apply to private for-profit colleges. But most schools are either public or private nonprofit. So that means that those schools, if they wish, could file an H-1B visa for any of these students, no matter whether there are visas available or not. But they don't, because it costs them money. They are charged filing fees that they don't want to pay. So even though, so let's give a specific example. Let's say you've just graduated at the top of your class in physics, and you want to go into a graduate program, and you want to do a teaching fellowship. You want to be hired by the school while you take your additional credits. They could hire you as an H-1B, but chances are they won't. For a lot of reasons, mostly because they don't want to spend the money. But that would help you because, and this is something that very few people know because it's not widely discussed on all of those wonderful websites that everybody hangs out on. Let's say you got a 5-hour-a-week H-1B, cap exempt H-1B to teach 5 hours a week for your qualifying college or university. If you wished, you could then go out and take a 40-hour-a-week job as an H-1B working for any private company. As long as you maintain the cap exempt H-1B, you may work cap subject, even though you never went through the cap. Okay. So, again, it's very important to plan ahead. There is no easy plan ahead because, candidly, the entire application process can change on one fact. Can I ask all the questions? Of course, but it takes a very long time to go through the checklist. So I'm not going to ask you most questions unless there's something in your background that suggests. So it's like when you're going through a form online. Depending on your answer to the second question, you might get 3 different lists of question 3s. And then 3 different lists of question 4s, depending on how you answer. So that's how this process is. And that's why it's so difficult to just give a simple answer to somebody and say, oh, you can do this. Maybe you can, maybe you can't. You may appear to be eligible to do it, but I need to ask you a lot of questions to know for sure. Let's shift a little bit, because I know you want to save a little time to talk about green cards. I have not yet talked about green cards, but let's talk for a little bit about startups, because I get a lot of questions. Here I am at the Cambridge Innovation Center. I get a lot of questions about startups.
Yep.
So lots of people come to me and they say, great idea for a company, and the investors love me, and I'm going to this, and I'm going to that, and I'm going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg, and oh, by the way, I went down and formed my own company. Can that get me a visa? Maybe, maybe not, which unfortunately is the most accurate answer for most immigration questions. Maybe, maybe not. First of all, the government, the United States government, is not in the business of helping you to pursue your dream. The Immigration Service and all of the related agencies that you work through with immigration are committed to one thing and one thing only, and that is keeping you out. That's all they care about. They live to find a reason to say no to your application. So, when we prepare an application, I don't just prepare an application so that it can be approved. I try to prepare an application so there is no way it can be denied. A lot of extra work. You can do it either way, but I prefer to do it as strongly as possible. Now, if you start a company, there's going to be a great deal of pushback if you try to use your company to petition for your visa. In order to make that happen, we have to set the company up in such a way so that you do not have control over the company, so that there is an independent board that, if they wish, can fire you. If you don't set it up that way, they won't approve it. That's number one. Number two, you must have enough money in that company so that the company is functional. It's not enough to say, oh, I got a grant of $50,000 and that's enough to keep me going until I go to my next round of funding. Right, Mr. Watson? No. If you come in, let's say you have a bachelor's, a master's degree in computer science, and you're going to set up a computer-based business. One of the other things, not only must the job you're doing be closely related to the degree that you have, but, and we have this a lot, I represent a lot of companies in here, and we have this problem a lot. When a small company makes a visa application for someone, the Immigration Service almost always challenges the application to make you prove that this person is going to be doing the work that they do, in this case, computer programming, for at least 90 to 95% of their day. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is Steve Jobs could never have gotten a visa, because by his own admission, he would design Apple computers during the day, then sell them and package them and ship them. You can't do that on an H-1B visa. You must do only the job, if it's engineering or physics or whatever, you must be doing only that. You can't be doing sales. You can't be doing other things. You can't be doing marketing. It has to be a full-time job in your specialty. And if you don't have that, they'll say no. So those are some of the problems. There's one other thing. There's one other option. It does not apply to many countries. Unfortunately, it does not apply to India. There are, however, a number of countries, or China, the two most populous countries in the world. There are a number of countries that have entered into treaties with the United States, treaties of investment and treaties of commerce and trade. These are called an E as in echo, an E visa, E2 investment, E1 trade. Now, what you can do if you're from one of these countries, you can, with a minimal amount of money invested in the business, create an E2 business. The problem is this. The biggest requirement for qualifying for an E-visa is that the company, the employer, must be owned 50% or more by nationals of the treaty country. So, if you're from the United Kingdom and you start your own company, at least 50% of the ownership of that company has to be UK nationals. They can be you, but it has to be 50%. Here's the problem, and this has happened so many times. As you go through your rounds of funding, you have to give away ownership of your company. And when you cross the 50% border, you no longer have an E-visa. So there's a lot more flexibility if your country is on the treaty list. But you have to be careful in how you set it up. Now let's quickly look at green cards. There are three primary ways you get a green card. You get a green card by essentially claiming political asylum. This is not going to work for most people. You get a green card if you have a close family member, mother, father, sister, brother, son, daughter, or spouse, who can petition for you. But in the family category, there are very, very long backlogs. And so the only really two categories that are wide open are for spouses of U.S. citizens, so if you marry a United States citizen, that cures almost all problems and issues. Even if you're illegal, we can deal with it.
Okay.
You can be working illegally for 10 years. As long as you were inspected when you came in and you marry a United States citizen, we can take care of it. The other category in family is parents of United States citizens. I just got a call this morning from a woman who's a United States citizen. Her mother's getting older. She wants to bring her mother in. No problem. There are no backlogs, no quotas on those. And then the final thing, which is of the greatest concern, and maybe perhaps it might be best to address it in another show, is getting a green card based on a job. And there are a lot of issues with employment-based green cards. Our employment-based, and so we call it EB, employment-based EB green cards have several different categories, and it's also broken out by countries. So our visa quota system is supposedly designed to prevent very populous countries from taking over the entire category. They do that by automatically creating quotas for individuals from those countries. So it comes as no surprise that the two longest quotas are India and China. And those two quotas go back, depending on your category, 5, 8, 10, in some cases 12 years. We could cure this, but there's no political will right now to fix that, what I believe is a broken system. So if you're from primarily India or China, you have to plan even more carefully how you're going to remain here for 5, 6, 8, 10 years, lawfully in a non-immigrant status. The categories, there are several different categories. The bottom category is EB3, and that's a job offer that requires a bachelor's degree or a minimum of 2 years of specific training and work experience. That category is backed up several years, even worldwide there are some backlogs. But if you can qualify in that category, then you basically get in line. You may have to wait a little bit, but you ultimately get a green card. The problem is, before, you can't just file an application and say, oh look, Neil has these skills and I really like his skills and I want to hire him to do this job. You have to first go through a very, very difficult and complicated process called labor certification, where in effect you go through a separate branch of the government, the Department of Labor, and you prove that there are no other U.S. workers who have the minimum qualifications to do this job. So it doesn't matter if you are supremely skilled at this job. If the job only requires this, even though you have that, you can't get certified. So we as immigration lawyers work very hard to figure out how to distinguish you so that U.S. workers who are not really qualified to do the job won't bounce you out because they appear to be qualified. So that's one. EB2 is another category that generally requires a master's degree, since there are fewer people in the world with master's degrees than bachelor's degrees. You can appreciate that the lines tend to be shorter because there are fewer people that qualify for the visas. Then there is what we call EB1. EB1 has 3 primary categories. One category is if you are in the top 1% in the world in your subject, you're an EB1. That's EB1A. EB1B if you are primarily a researcher, and for the most part this means a PhD researcher, then you can get an EB-1B. And EB-1C is if you are an international executive of successful international companies. Now, we have someone here at CIC. I would encourage you to talk to her. Her name is Rachel Cassius, who specializes only in EB-1A. And given the fact that we're surrounded by all of these MIT and Harvard PhDs, there's a strong chance. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of money, but you don't need an employer to file. You can file on your own. And if you have a strong enough case, that's it, you get a green card. And because there are so few people that qualify for that, it's almost never backlogged. So you always have that opportunity. As far as the other options go, there are different ways to build it. As I said in the very beginning, every time I get hired to get someone a visa, I'm always looking ahead to figure out the best way to set them up to apply for a green card.
Thank you so much. This is invaluable.
Thank you.